Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Conversation with Carl. As always, remember to follow, like, and subscribe for the latest content. I am very excited today to talk to my next guest, Stan Zimmerman, a veteran writer, director, producer, and actor. Stan has written for iconic sitcoms like The Golden Girls and Roseanne, and TV movies like Annie. He's also credited with the Brady Bunch movies, directed many theater productions, and so much more. We could keep going with Stan's accomplishments, but then we would never talk to Stan. So let's welcome Stan Zimmerman to the conversation.
Hi, welcome. Well, just to clarify, I'm a writing veteran, not a veteran. Okay, and we have to clink our coffee mugs.
Yes, I have my coffee mug too.
There we go.
The Golden Girls. I have all four of them. Do you have all four of them, or just?
No, I just have this is a line we wrote.
Yeah.
No, I will not have a nice day. On both sides, 2 no's. We wrote the line and I still had to pay for this mug, so go figure.
That's not good.
That's not fair.
So you wrote for the Golden Girls. Do you want
Season 1.
Yes, season 1. So
So imagine being there.
yes.
The very beginning when nobody thought a show with 4 older women would ever be successful. And look, we're still talking about it 40 years later. Last year was the 40th anniversary of the premiere of it.
Yeah, I mean, will watch it a lot. If it's on, I stop and I watch it. I know a lot of the lines in the show. I saw you nominated for a WGA award for Rose's mother. You were
Yeah.
pretty you were pretty young then, and you were writing for older women. Do you want to talk about
Yes.
that?
Well, I didn't know 2 years later that B. Arthur was not happy about that when, she saw us and most of the writing staff was much younger. So she was like, where are all the old writers? She had worked with a lot of older writers on Maude and then she read the script and she was like, they got it. They got the voice. And it's really about listening. And I learned that at a young age, actually at the age of 7. I was studying theater at Cranbrook Theater School in Birmingham, Michigan. And one of my early teachers said, just listen to people. Go to malls and watch people, how they move and how they talk. And so wherever I am, I always carry my pen. And when I'm at family dinners or meals with friends, I'm always jotting down something that I hear. It's a great way to understand how people talk. And that's a very specific way of writing when you have to go on a TV show that somebody else created. It's easy to, I wouldn't say easy, but you can, when you're creating your own shows, you can, you're making up how they sound. But to mimic the way Susan Harris so beautifully wrote these 4 women, it's a real craft. And we learned that.
Gilda Radner wrote that as well, that she would follow people around and she would take notes, and that's where she would get a lot of that stuff for her act.
It must be a Detroit thing because she's from Detroit. So it's just something we do in the Midwest. I don't know. We just stalk people in malls. But still to this day, my writing partner and I, when we go out to lunch, we'll watch 2 people and we'll say, all right, who do you want to be? And we'll start doing what we imagine their dialogue is, what they're talking about. Watch a show like Cheers and, Norm comes in.
Hey, Norm.
Hey. So we went to an early taping of Cheers before it was even on the air. And that's how we kind of got started. We wrote a spec Cheers episode and we just heard that, hey. We didn't even have a script to read. So we went back and we're like, they have to say that. So when we did that in the script, people really knew that we were paying attention.
Did you like writing for one person over the other?
Well, I have found through the years, I just would love writing for women. I found that women are much more vocal about their opinions, so it was easier. As men were raised to kind of like hold it in and be strong. I like that the women in my life, in particular, my grandmother, my mother, and my sister, were not shy about telling us how they felt. And so I would just take all that in. And I was, always had great female friends. And so that's kind of what my little book is about. The girls from Golden to Gilmore. So it's really about, people kept asking me, why are you always writing for women? You're like these 2 guys. And I think that's part of the reason as writers, you could just be more eloquent and be in touch with your feelings. And I feel that writing for these women have made me a better man.
One of the things about the Golden Girls is that there's always a moral lesson when you're watching the show. And I know you only wrote for the first season. Was that something that you guys were told to do? Is that your marching order? Like come up with a moral lesson or?
Not moral issues. We think of it more as arc of a character and stories,
Yeah.
and that they learn something. What in television back then, because there were no reruns, they had to make episodes kind of what they call evergreen, that they kind of yes, they grow a little bit, but they kind of are in the same place because that way in syndication back then, they could be in any order. Like now you can go online and watch any episode that you want. And that kind of I don't know how we would have fared had we stayed on the series because the characters kind of were stuck in a rut. And I would notice years later, I didn't really watch it after we left, maybe a year or two after. And then when I would tune in, I would kind of hear similar jokes that we all had written season one, but they were slightly changed. And the thing that we loved about the Roseanne show is that it really felt like real life in that it was growing and changing and people died and she had a job and then she lost the job or the plant closed and she went and worked somewhere else and in a restaurant. And so that just seemed more our style. And
Yeah.
what Roseanne was doing was very, very unusual for television. I mean, I hadn't really seen it before except for Norman Lear kind of shows. And I was always very attracted to watching those shows as a kid. That was more my speed than some of the other shows.
Yeah. Well, Norman Lear does that with his shows. I think Archie Bunker changes over the he
A
stays the
lot.
same, but he
But he
changes.
lost I mean, Edith died, or they would challenge him with these great stories, whether it was a man in a dress or somebody gay or their black neighbors, and that was what was so exciting about that style of writing. Rue McClanahan, to her credit, very early on came over to us and said, "Challenge my character." She came from the theater, as did B. Arthur, and she was not afraid of, paint my character into a corner and see how I can get out. And we had never heard that because really Golden Girls for us was kind of like comedy writing 101 because we did not take any writing classes at NYU. It was just we were learning on the job. And so we went back to our office and we thought about what she said. And that's how we came up with the episode called Adult Education, which I'm sure you remember when Blanche gets propositioned by her college teacher. She goes back to school and he would give her a good grade if
If
she
he
was
slept with her, yeah.
because we went back and said, "What is Blanche about?" She was about, "I'll have sex with anybody." So what
Yeah.
situation could we put her in where that would be the natural way to get ahead, but she just couldn't do it? And that made for a really interesting story, and that also led to the lesbian kiss episode on Roseanne. Is
That was
somebody
a big episode.
it
That
was huge. I would go to
that
work and then I would come home at night and that'd be on the 11 o'clock news. And
yeah.
so it was odd that they were talking about us because the network did not want to film the episode. And to the credit of Roseanne and her then husband, Tom Arnold, they fought for it. And as complicated of a character and person as she is today, the fact that she fought for that episode and they went to the network and said, if you don't, we will buy it back and we will put it on television on HBO.
Oh,
Like that was
wow.
unheard of to put your own
Yeah.
money up for
Well,
that.
she
Believed it.
did a breaking ground with her show. What is it like working on the set or writing for the show?
Well, Golden Girls on both were scary, you know? Golden Girls because you're standing there or you're in rooms and there's B. Arthur, she's Maud. And Betty White, I grew up loving Mary Tyler Moore. There were a lot of pinch me moments that here we were, and they were saying words that we had come up with. So, in Golden Girls, there was so much pressure as the ratings started to rise, and it was a huge, massive hit. The producers would come into the writer's room and sit there with us, and like, you can't just write an okay joke. It had to be the best joke because these were the best actresses. On Roseanne, we actually turned down the going on season one. They wanted us to sign a long term contract, and we weren't quite ready in our minds for that. And then when we saw what it became, it was exactly the kind of show and writing that we loved. And we really campaigned to get on it. But then there was, a lot of office politics and just not the healthiest work environment. And people probably know the story about it happened the year we were there. We got to the first day of filming, and Tom and Roseanne were laughing and said, "All right, we have a gift for the writers. For 21 of us, all line up." And they had T-shirts with numbers on them, 1 through 21. And so my birthday's October 13th, and I was like fighting my way to get the 13th T-shirt, which I have still.
Yeah.
Um, and in line, I found out why they were giving us numbers. so that she wouldn't have to get to know our name. She could just point and say, 13, you're fired. Yeah. So all the writers are grumbling and furious. I'm like, what's the big deal? And then I suddenly realized, oh God, that's really horrible. So it was kind of that, which was odd to me that she didn't, embrace and respect the writers. But she came into Hollywood and they didn't respect her. And so she was
Yeah.
very cautious and not trusting of people, even though we were there to just make her look good and we would have done anything. And I was so naive and still young then that I was under the impression, I don't know where I got this, that somehow if I hugged her, all her fears would float away and she would love me and love the writers. And the staff said, do not touch her. Don't go near her. If she's,
Yes, that's rule number 1.
yeah.
You're just the writer. You don't know anything. Okay, sorry, Stan.
So if she sees the whites of your eyes, she can go, you're gone.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, I found the biggest guy on stage, and I would hold my script and kind of hide behind him. And then we wrote the lesbian kiss episode, and we're on stage and we hear her go, who the hell wrote this? All the writers parted, and it was like going towards, the wizard and Wizard of Oz, and I was a scarecrow. And I felt like my legs were buckling under.
Yeah.
Probably didn't happen, and we walked up to her, not that close, and then she was like, "This is fucking funny," and then we're like, "Phew," and so
Well,
that got a little better.
she tells stories about how when she would go on Johnny Carson, she would have to call up, uh, Tom Arnold and be like, "Can you write some jokes for me?" So she
And that's
relied
why I
on
first saw
writers.
her one night. I just happened to be watching Johnny Carson, and he was really good about showcasing new talent and fresh voices. And I don't know why. I just that night I was up and I tuned in and I was like, who is she? I had never seen anybody talk like that and talk about the struggles of, growing up in the Midwest, which I had done, not to the level of where she did. She was, I think, more in trailers and that kind of living. And the next day we called our agent and said, who is this Roseanne Barr person? We want to develop a show for her. And his attitude was, nobody in America is going to want to watch a fat woman on a TV show. And we're like, okay, I don't think you should represent us anymore. So it was funny that she did come back into our lives later on, but we just could tell right from the beginning that she had a really unique voice, and that's what I just loved about that show and the characters, and Laurie Metcalf and John Goodman.
But that's one of the things that I think about writing. The shows that are successful are the shows that are fresh or new, are thinking outside of the box, are not doing what everyone else does. That's
Well,
why I think like
yeah,
that's why I think like when you're looking at like AI and it lands up, everyone's like, oh, AI can write you a script. It can't write you tomorrow. It can write you yesterday and it can write you what happened before, but it can't think about outside of the box, new issues, new ideas.
that's really well put. I'm gonna have to steal that, yes.
You can steal that,
I'm
Stan.
gonna steal that line. I like to say that AI doesn't have heart.
Yeah.
It can mimic what it's heard, like you said, the past. And what people have said about my writing and all the different genres that we've done is that you feel the heart beating of it. And so
Yeah.
we're very sensitive people. I am. So I hope that you can feel that. And to your point, that's why I've always wished that the networks and studios would trust whoever the writers are with the idea and go for
Can't.
it. You can't second guess what's going to be a hit. You don't know. And the ones that have become hits have because they have that original sound. And even people like Roseanne, they've made TV can make TV stars.
I think a lot of times people do not trust the writers, which, as you just said, they need to trust them. And once you start trusting the writers, you realize you're not going to hit a home run every time. But if you are working on it, sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. I think that that is what the network execs look at it like, oh, the numbers were this last week. We want it this next week. And if it's not the exact same, people get upset.
Yes, and there's so much money invested in it that they're trying to hedge their bets. But art is not like that. You have to go
Yeah.
with your gut, like when you go into a museum or you want a painting for your house or like what makes you feel, and that's what
Yeah.
you can't manufacture that. It happens. It's either the right time in the world to tell that story. Would the Golden Girls have been successful 10 years before or 10 years after? It just, we were ready to hear those four women talk about those stories then, and we still are, I guess.
after you would write the script and you would sit down and you would go to the read through, you talked a little bit about being scared. I mean, I would have been petrified with B. Arthur and Rue McClanahan and Betty White because none of them seemed like they suffer fools.
Well, at the table read, they were always far off, so we would kinda
Yeah,
hang back. We
yeah.
did, after one table read, end up in an elevator with just me, my writing partner, and B. Arthur, scared out of our minds. I don't know what we thought she would say, and then between the afternoon tapings and the evening tapings, we would all have dinner, and they would all be in robes. I don't know what they were wearing underneath. I don't think I want to know, but, we got friendly with the Getty, and she would say, "Come on over and eat with, me and Rue and Betty or B." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, she might talk to us, and then I'd have to say something funny or I would sound stupid." We were I mean, we were very young uh, but we were so lucky to be there, and at the time, so appreciative to be amongst the best and learn so much from that job.
Did you like writing for Roseanne and for that show, or were you
Yes.
nervous the whole time, or did you come home and throw up at night?
No, I don't let that affect me that much. It was odd because with 21 writers, there were certain rooms where I felt really comfortable and I could pitch, and then others I was really quiet. So I was wanting to figure out like why. Why did I, uh, because I found she had a lot of stand-up comics on staff because she wanted to get them insurance. So it was people like Norm Macdonald who had never written before. And these comics, they open their mouth and just the funniest things come out of them. Whereas my writing partner Jim and I, we craft a joke. We're writers,
Yeah.
so we'll sit there and we're like, well, what about this word? And blah, blah, blah. So it's harder to pitch something because our writing style is figuring it out, as we're typing it, not just verbally throwing out,
But isn't this whole thing about writing? The whole business, it's about being able to tell a story and using words and images,
yes.
and you
Knowing structure, knowing the right lines and jokes for that specific character. And on Roseanne, we got to teach a lot of these people like Norm Macdonald how to write for characters, not just say a funny line, but why is that line funny coming from Jackie, Laurie Metcalf's character? You can't have any other character say that joke. It only has to come from their personal experiences. And that's what makes it so real. And so we ended up being teachers on that show, which was exciting.
you also have to do setups, right? 'Cause, like, Jackie would set up Roseanne, Roseanne would set up Jackie,
Yeah, I
and
don't ever look
you
at
end
it
up
as
that
setups.
way.
Like some writers do, and it's formulaic like that. To me, I'll say something funny and I'm like, that's funny, and the room will laugh. I don't quite, it always makes me think, why is something funny? What makes you make that guttural sound, which is a laugh? It's so
Yeah.
interesting. Like that sound would emanate, obviously the older we get, we have other sounds
Yeah.
emanating, but that's another podcast.
Well, how do you know if I find something funny, it's gonna land and how it's gonna land? Because when you're writing for America, like, I'll talk about The Nanny. I never understood how that show, which is very, very Jewish, landed so well in Ohio and the Midwest, and, you know?
We worked on it very, very briefly. We had a deal at Sony and they were trying to write up the deal. And so they were like, go hang out with Fran and go to her beach house and work on stories. I'm like, that style of show wasn't my style.
Yeah,
It was a little bit broader. I mean, I think she's hysterical and they all were so talented. I think they just had universal themes. And
yeah.
that's why The Nanny was so popular for so long, even though it was very specifically, very Jewish. And then there was a lot of talk that really Estelle Getty and B. Arthur were Jewish characters, but
They were.
back then couldn't have Jewish characters on TV, so we called them Italian,
Yeah, they were Jewish.
obviously. But I think they were too afraid of having Jewish writers, and they were scared
Yeah.
then of what people would say.
I was just gonna talk about the Nanny for a second. There's a great scene where they come back after Passover, after one of the Seders, and they're sitting around and they're like, I'm little Gracie goes, "I could have a Bissell cheesecake." And I think that that's a line that I laugh at it, but I'm like,
Yeah.
"How does anyone know what that means?" Yeah, so,
No, sometimes.
yeah, it just falls.
Yeah, I'm doing a play and I have a line that's the word I say the word bupkis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go, "Not a bupkis," and when I did it in the South, I had to, like, kind of say, "That's a Yiddish word for" people were just like, "What?" But you do it in New York and everybody knows, it
No,
doesn't
it's yeah.
matter, what you were raised, you're
You
around
know it.
all of that, and that's what I love. I was so lucky to get to go to NYU and live in New York, and I now have a little timeshare, so I'm back there a lot, and there's just something about the energy of that city. The minute I land, I just feel like I'm home.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Great.
The Brady Bunch movie you wrote, the Brady Bunch movies,
Yes.
that's such a great talk about that because grew up on watching the Brady Bunch. I love the Brady Bunch.
I grew up on it too, and the funny thing is that I don't know about you, but didn't you think Alice was, like, the funniest character on the whole show?
Well, she was the person that kept everybody together.
Yeah, but I thought
Yes.
she would make jokes, and then because we would rewatch them and use bits from it and then kinda
Yeah.
spin it. She never had a funny line. It was just her face and her expressions that were so funny, but her lines weren't that funny, so that's a testament to the actor. We went on the movie, we were the 5th group of writers. So somebody came up with the idea of keeping them stuck in the past, but living
Yeah.
in contemporary world, which I think was a brilliant idea. We read the script and they Betty Thomas from Hill Street Blues was attached to direct it. And they were having problems and they wanted rewrites, just like polishing the dialogue. And we thought they didn't really dig in and mine it in a campy, funny, edgy way. We just wanted to like push it. And we had a meeting with her and she said, write it for 3 groups: the people that grew up with it that know it, kids that have never seen it before, and stoners. And we're like, got it. We got the assignment. We can do it. We really did. So a lot of the jokes go over the kids' heads. And I've had so many people come to me and said, when I was little, I didn't know what that joke meant. And it was like, I can't believe you got to say that. And that's what was so fun. It seemed so innocent. And we would love to do a streaming series with the 3 girls called the Brady Ladies. They're stuck in 1995 when the first movie come out, but it's today in West
Yeah.
Hollywood, which I think would be really funny. And the meme of Sure Jan is now, I mean, you can't spend a day online and not see it somewhere. And we wrote that line not thinking that it would, resonate so much in today's politics.
Yeah, no, it's like these shows we go back to and they're very much part of our life. You also wrote The Diary of Anne Frank,
Well, I
Latinx
didn't
when
write that,
no,
so
you
I
didn't
just
write that. Okay.
directed it. I did
Okay. You
not change
directed
the
it. Oh,
word.
sorry.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was,
okay, sorry.
Wendy Kesselman did a revised edition, for Broadway in 1997 that Natalie Portman starred as Anne Frank. So there was the original version in the '50s that Otto Frank, Anne's father, kinda shepherded. So it was very
Okay.
clean, and then when they did this revival, we went back to the diary, but in the real diary, she complains about her mother, which girls do, you know? She talks
Yeah.
about touching her breasts, which girls do. So they put that little pieces of that into the script. Then in 2018, woke up one morning again. If it's not Johnny Carson, this time it was CNN, and I saw a news report about a Jewish woman in LA who was hiding a Latina mom and her 2 daughters when the mom's husband was deported by ICE. And my mind just went to hiding people in a house. And I thought of Anne Frank. And I thought, what if I did the play Don't Change the Word, direct it, and I cast everyone in the attic with Latinx actors? And that's what we did. And we've done 9 iterations of it. Theater Festival in Vancouver. We've done many theaters. Started in a 50-seat theater in LA, and we just played this last November in a 268-seat theater. And we've been mostly focusing on school groups coming because in California, reading the diary is no longer required reading.
That's
And it's been at the time when we did it back then, people said you have to be careful and you can't compare ICE and Nazis. And
where are
here,
we today?
here we are today.
Yes.
And so there's been a lot of controversy around that, but you have to see the play. I'm not saying it's the exact same thing. I'm saying, what can we learn from it? I don't know about you, but I was brought up with never again. And if you don't talk about it and learn from the past, you do repeat it. And that's
Yeah.
because we haven't learned. That's why we are repeating it. And that's why it's so frightening to me when you see, our government taking down, about history of slavery and civil rights. Like,
Yeah.
that's part of our history. Like, we have to learn
Yeah.
from that.
Yes. We have to learn from it. As we start to wrap up here, do you have any suggestions for young people who are trying to get into this business? And are you just going to tell them to be stupid and go for it?
Well, I would never say that. I mean, as people told me when I thought I'd be an actor, but I think it applies to writing as well and probably most other professions, you have to do what you feel you must do. There's nothing else you can do, especially a profession like entertainment where you're always getting no's. So you have to figure out how to find the people that are going to say yes to you and keep going, stick with your vision. I think today you have so many more opportunities. When I was starting out, there were 3 networks. That was it. And if your script was written and the pilot didn't work, it's might as well be thrown away and burned. And today, at least, they're looking at old pilots. You could film it on your phone. You can make it. You can turn it into a play. You can put it up anywhere. And I think that's really exciting for new content creators.
Do you look at the reviews?
I tend not to. Lauren Graham from Gilmore Girls that I wrote on, I was doing a Bravo reality show where I was on camera. It was a show called Situation Comedy to find the next great sitcom that Sean Hayes from Will and Grace was producing. And she said, Stan, do not go online and read comments because they'll start picking apart the way you look. You know, so of course I had to just peek, and I thought, okay, the first negative thing I'll stop. And luckily, I didn't get to any. But it is very difficult when you're creating something, or whether you're directing or writing, and you spend all this time on it, and then you're like, here, judge it. So there's
Yeah.
always like, and I've been pretty lucky with reviews. I mean, there've been a few times people didn't get what I was doing, not very
Yeah.
often, and that's just their opinion. I know I've been in the theater with the audiences and I've heard them laugh. So maybe one person who happens to write the review didn't get it, but
Yeah.
I'm hearing the laughter. I'm hearing people crying. That's what's so great about theater. You're there and you're feeling the emotions that the audience is and that environment. And especially after COVID, to be in rooms and having a shared experience is really important to me.
When I was Al Roker's producer on the Weather Channel for his show Wake Up with Al, he would say, if you read the comments on social, you have to believe the bad ones just like you have to believe the good ones. And that's why like I'm always like, yeah, you don't need to read all that stuff.
No, and especially
Sometimes.
a lot of these things, they're made, they're done. It would
Yeah.
be one thing if you have like an existing TV series and you could kind of gauge how the audience is feeling about characters, and then maybe that might affect how I would tell the stories as it goes, because it is an interesting barometer. But once the play is up, it's up. Like I can't,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. As we wrap up, anything else you want to talk about, say that I have not asked? I mean, I could ask
Oh,
you
there's so
hundreds
much
of other
more. We
questions.
did. We didn't get into Gilmore Girls that much, and then play. I'm going off to England to do a reading with Vanessa Williams called Right Before I Go, which is using real suicide notes. And I've been performing it all over the United States. I did it off Broadway in September, and there's a school edition. I've been taking it around too. So I think going back to Norman Lear and some of Roseanne, I've been wanting to marry art and advocacy together. And if you're making people laugh, I just like making people think and move them with the art that I'm creating today.
That's what we hope. I've enjoyed a lot of your work, even though I probably do not know what jokes you wrote, but I have been enjoying a lot of
Just
it
if you
and
laugh,
watching
they're
it.
mine. How about that?
Yes, if correct. What is the book again?
The
Hold it
girls
up.
from Golden to Gilmore, stories about all the wonderful women I've worked with, and Roseanne.
And the website is
ZimmermanStan.com.
okay. Uh, Dan Zimmerman, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone out there, thank you for listening. As always, tell me what you think in the comments. Until next time, be safe, everyone.